Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about pelvic power, an untapped source of energy which I'm going to show you how to use. An awful lot of people are really just not tapping into the power that they actually have in their golf swing because they don't realize that it's there. On the contrary, a lot of the movements that they're making, thinking they're doing it correctly, are actually costing them energy in their golf swing. And one of these is what we call pelvic power. If you actually watched the video I did a couple of weeks ago about what I called the tilt and turning of the hips, then you might have an idea about where I'm going with the lesson this week. It's all about what happens afterwards. Once I've tilted and turned my hips, what do I do? And that is when we release this power. We're using what you call, or they call, ground forces to accelerate the golf club. By using energy out of the ground moving up, it's going to help us to move the club down faster. And it's going to give us, hopefully, some untapped extra club head speed. In order to do that, though, first of all, I want to show you how to get this rotation going correctly and maybe contradict one of the beliefs that you've had about hip and pelvic rotation before, which is actually stopping you from using this energy correctly. When we actually chip a ball, we've all learned mainly to get the weight into the left side and then chip. What that actually means then is you're actually loading your hip over your knee, over your foot. It's also giving you a set pelvic position, a neutral pelvic position, but it's going to make it very difficult for your hips to rotate. Now, this isn't a problem when you're chipping because you're only making a very small movement, but it's going to be a big problem if you get into that position in your golf swing. And what's happening an awful lot in your golf swing is people are moving into this lead side far too early, getting the hip too early over the lead foot, and they are unconsciously blocking themselves. Any extension then from the pelvis and from the body is actually just going to push them up and cause them to top the golf ball. It's not actually going to help them to accelerate the club in a decent way in any manner, shape or form. So the trick, first of all, and that's why we're here chipping to start off with, is to actually get the feeling of turning the pelvis behind the lead leg and not allowing the hip joint to get over the foot joint, so to speak. So what I want you to do to start off with is just have the feeling as you rotate of keeping knee bend, keep your bum back. A lot of times we talk about it kind of a duck's arse, for want of a better description, a little bit of a kind of a bowing of your lower spine, and you'll find that that will help you rotate, and it will help you rotate easier if you don't rotate over any given foot. We don't want to rotate over the back foot, and we don't want to rotate over the front foot. We want to rotate as if kind of suspended in the middle. Now, obviously, you're not going to stay in the middle, because if that is the middle and I rotate, you can actually see I am rotating ahead of the center of my stance, but I'm still behind the lead foot and the lead foot joint. And this will give me kind of the feeling as if my hips were just a plate and I'm just rotating the plate. And because I'm keeping the same bend in both legs, I'm not tilting the plate to the right and I'm not tilting the plate to the left. Then it's just a question of synchronizing that with my shoulder movement, and suddenly I've got a lovely little chipping movement. And the reason I like to practice this is I can actually feel the quality of my hip rotation through the quality of my impact. If I find that I'm actually catching the ground before the ball, then I know that my plate is tilted backwards. And if I am topping the ball, then I know I've probably kind of gone uphill and got my lead hip over my lead foot. And I want the feeling of basically staying on a level playing field with the ball and just turning and just taking the club, clipping the ball off the top of the grass. And that gives me the first step in the hip rotation. So once I get a feeling for this movement, I want to get a feeling for the extension of the movement and what that's actually going to do for me, especially with the driver. Now, I've done a number of videos on the driver. I think it's worth talking about setup once more. When you take a driver in your hand, you want to basically stand like your 7-iron. You're a little bit more upright because you're getting your spine angled around about 100 degrees to the shaft. And then let go of it with your trail hand and go about a foot's width wider. And then by regripping, you're actually going to tilt your spine slightly to the side, which will actually cause you to come slightly from the inside on the ball. And that will counteract hitting the golf ball so late in this swing movement where the ball is or the club has actually passed the deepest point and is on its way up and around the body again. So basically you're counteracting the tendency for the club to be swinging to the left of the target for a right-handed golfer by tilting your spine slightly in the opposite direction. When you're actually swinging the club then, the main trick is as you come back not to get the feeling of going over your trail foot or in the downswing coming over your lead foot, but being suspended by your legs in the middle. And you get this kind of rotational feeling, which is probably for the majority of you going to feel as if you were going backwards and away from the target with your hips rather than going towards the target with your hips. Now I know this is contradictory to a lot of the things that you've learned, but really if you work a lot with what they call ground forces and with these plates which will actually show you the weight distribution of tour players when they hit balls, you'll actually be surprised to see that actually they don't have all their weight on the front foot at impact. In many cases, like Justin Thomas, for instance, he's virtually in the air at impact because he's virtually jumped. And in order to do that, he's got to be able to use the flexibility of his legs and also his pelvis in order to give him this spring. And he can't do that if he's already over the lead leg. He's just not going to get around and he's not going to be able to use the vertical forces correctly. There's a guy on the internet called George Gankis who also does some really great videos, and I'll leave a link to his channel down below, where he is actually talking about you basically turning almost like this into the shot. And to be honest, that's the way it should feel. It's not going to look like that because when you do it fluidly, you go through this rotation and into extension before you've actually gone into this position. But the feeling that you're using the ground forces to rotate your hips and then the extension to accelerate your arms and hands is absolutely perfect. So what are you actually thinking about when you're doing it? Well, hopefully nothing, but when you're practicing it, you want to have the feeling that you start the downswing down, again with this tilting back of the pelvis. Then you have this rotation of the pelvis staying behind the lead foot. And as you get to the end of the rotation, you want to be then straightening both legs. Both legs are pushing off. The trail leg, and for all, especially the big toe, or the ball of the big toe, is pressing you forward, and the ball of your lead foot is pressing you back. So you get this kind of contradiction, these two opposing forces, which are going to help you to stay in the middle and behind that lead foot during impact. So we're coming into it around, and this is when it's happening, and it's happening at the same time as you are releasing the club through the ball. So you want, a bit like a chip, because you have no hinge, you will actually get around, and virtually as your hips stop rotation and before you've gone into extension, you would hit the chip. Now with the drive, your club is still back here. Your trail elbow and wrist is still hinged. And that is going to be the yin to the legs yang. And this is where this extra power comes from. If you don't do this, you can't do this. You've got to get your pelvis back in order to release it through. I can remember a long time ago Jack Nicklaus giving an interview and saying when he wants to hit it further, he swings it slower. And I never really was able to understand how he would get more energy, more ball speed by swinging it slower. Maybe you'd hit more the center of the club. But I think what he was meaning is he was giving his hips more time to turn, more time to get round and get what you could say deeper. And the deeper that he got, the more he was able to extend. And the more extension he got, the more power he was able to generate and the further he was able to hit it. There's untapped power in your hips. Try it out. If you like the video as ever, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, why not? I'll be back very shortly. Look after yourselves until then. Bye-bye now.